Hello everybody, I am Ace Creeper and welcome to a brand new Doctor Who Classic review. We are starting our first Classic season of reviews. We're starting this week with Robot and continuing on through the following weeks, next week with Ark in Space, followed by the Sontaran Experiment, Genesis of the Daleks and Revenge of the Cybermen. I'm very excited to have a proper formula for the Classic reviews, working through a whole season at a time, because it means I get a lot of Classic Who watched as well, and not just the sort of fan favourites, like all the other ones in between as well, like today's story, I suppose. Today we're going to be talking about Tom Baker's debut as the Doctor, Season 12's first story, Robot. If you're not familiar with the format on this channel for our reviews, we're going to talk about story. Then we're going to talk specifically about the first act and the last act, so the first act being episodes 1 and 2, and the last act being episodes 3 and 4. We're then going to talk about characters, best bits, and then an overall score out of 10, and a little bit of a summary towards the end. So without any further ado, let's get into the main chunk of the video. So, the story. The world is at stake by a secret organisation who's stealing secret plans from UNIT. Bad decision, obviously. No one knows who it was or how they even did it, but all evidence points to a mysterious robot in some place called the Think Tank. Meanwhile, the new incarnation of the Doctor is recovering from his latest regeneration. And that's basically the story. You've got a big robot threat, you've got a secret organisation, you've got plans from UNIT being stolen, and you've got the Fourth Doctor waking up from a brand new regeneration and trying to get used to his new body, his new personality, everything like that. And yeah, so it's a good balance. The first act. So episodes 1 and 2, like any sort of first act for a standard Classic Who story, you get setup. However, this time it's not as dull as I would have expected. It's still kind of dull. You've got the stuff with the Think Tank and the Secret Society and the robot. Personally, I didn't find that too interesting, at least in the first half of the story. However, what I did find interesting was seeing Tom Baker adapt to become the Doctor. Obviously, the famous scene where he's got the sort of skipping rope, walking through different costumes, smashes the brick, like, it's just entertaining. Tom Baker brings a whole new energy to the screen when he's on, and like whenever Tom Baker's on screen, your eyes are just fixated on what he's doing because he's just a fascinating man. And what he brings to this character, even from like the first second he's on screen, is just actually wonderful to watch. I also haven't seen too many post-regeneration stories from Classic Who, so it was kind of interesting to see that process. The only problem there is I don't know whether I'm actually interested in what this episode is doing with the process, or whether I'm more just interested with seeing it in Classic Who for one of the first times, because obviously if I've maybe seen all of them, maybe this wouldn't hold up as well. I'm not quite sure. But it's still enjoyable, it's still entertaining, and it still grabs me in a little bit. Like, I'm curious to see what Classic Who did with the whole post-generation stuff, and it was interesting to find that it's basically no different to how New Who handles it. The cliffhanger at the end of the first act in the second episode with the Doctor's death under a robot, you know, it's a little bit redundant because it's, you know, his second episode ever out of a 4-part story, so it's kind of like, yeah, I know, it does the standard thing, and it's a decent cliffhanger. It's just like, you know where it's going to go, like, he's going to get saved. It's left a little bit redundant, and you know, the Doctor Who cliffhangers really need to bring the punch, and a lot of the times they do, and they absolutely nail it, but that one was specifically a little bit like, well, pointless. He's going to get out, isn't it? It's like, it's not like, I wasn't wondering, oh, how's he going to get out of this one? It's like, well, I'm sure, like, UNIT and all that sort of thing are just round the corner. It's like, it wasn't as... I don't know how to say it, like, I'm sort of acting a little bit snobby here, I'm trying not to be, but it's sort of like, when Doctor Who gives you a cliffhanger, especially in Classic Who, a lot of the times it's like, ooh, I wonder how they're going to get out of this one. But this one actually was just like, yeah, he's going to get out, so it doesn't matter. The last act, episodes 3 and 4, were definitely somewhat of a step up from the first half of the story. We'll talk more about specifics in terms of the Secret Society and the robot and all that sort of stuff in terms of character later on, but overall it's fine. It's just a bit dull when you compare it to other stories, especially ones surrounding this episode through the rest of the season. It doesn't hold up as well. The final episode is definitely interesting, especially with its strange sort of King Kong connotations. The giant monster, the female companion, it works and it fits, especially when the robot just goes absolutely massive towards the end of the 4th episode, which surprisingly didn't look awful. I mean, it's dated, sure, it's dated, but it didn't look anywhere near as bad as I would have expected that effect to. When it actually started to get big and I was like, oh my god, I wasn't like, oh my god, that's dated really badly. I was like, oh, okay, not too bad, not too bad. You can tell it's VFX, and you can tell it's not very good VFX, because it's definitely dated. This is the 70s. But I'm looking at it and going, yeah, no, it's not bad actually. It's not as bad as I would have expected them to be able to do, so, you know, props to them. And yeah, I really enjoyed the way the story wrapped up, having Harry step aboard the TARDIS and all that sort of thing. That was quite interesting, and yeah, I mean, that's all I really want to say about the story. The story isn't too deep in terms of what it tries to do. It's very surface level, which I suppose is definitely a criticism, but there's certain aspects, you know, that I'll pick out, but I'll get more specific in terms of that when I talk about my overall score. But for now, let's talk about characters. First of all, the Fourth Doctor, the absolute best part of the story, in my opinion. Totally steals the show in almost every way, in every scene he's in. And that's what I said earlier, like when he's on screen and he's got that on-screen presence that is not just average and what you'd expect, but he's got the kind of on-screen presence that you look at and you just can't take your eyes off him because he's just doing something always, and he's always just commanding the presence. And that is what you want from a lead actor in Doctor Who. It's not his best story. I've seen other Fourth Doctor stories, and probably most of them, if not all of them, are better than this. But in terms of introducing the character, he was definitely a main focus of the story, and that was part of it. You have to have a sort of surface level story to be able to surface the character, and what I did feel like Robot did really well, despite what it did with the story itself and the sort of enjoyable aspects of that, it did a lot for Tom Baker bringing this new actor into the role, and he absolutely smashed it, you know. That's down to Baker, but it's also down to the sort of story drafting team who made this story a little bit less important and drastic in exchange for Tom Baker being able to actually bring more to the role. I absolutely loved seeing Tom Baker in the role. He develops incredibly well over just 4 episodes. By the end of episode 4, there's no doubt about the fact that he's the Doctor. And the scarf, the hat, everything is just, I mean, I own it. It's iconic, and it's never not going to be iconic. And even just seeing it is like, oh my god. Like when he steps out that TARDIS for the first time and he's wearing that iconic costume, it's like, yeah, he's the Doctor now. He's the Doctor there. Now it's exciting. Now I'm buzzing. I'm excited by this. Sarah Jane, not really too much to say about Sarah Jane, you know, basically how she is in other stories. She's a brilliant companion, independent, involved in the story, genuinely entertaining to watch. You feel for her. She's a little bit screamy here and there, but that's what most classic companions are like, so I can't really drag that away from her. Sarah Jane is, and probably always will be, one of the best Doctor Who companions ever, if not the best. And this is absolutely no exception. She's fantastic in this, as she's fantastic in every single story. There's nothing too deep to talk about, you know, she serves the plot well, but again, the story is more about the Fourth Doctor. It's not too much about Sarah Jane as a companion, you know, so I did really enjoy it and what it tried to do, but it wasn't anything more than surface level, just like the rest of the story. So yeah, Sarah Jane was great, but she wasn't really given too much. But what she was given was good. The Brigadier and Harry Sullivan, putting these two together like I did with sort of Tegan and Nyssa last time. Both of these characters are great, but I haven't really got too much to say about them, so I'm not going to give them their own segment. The Brigadier is great fun, as per usual. He's a fantastic character and a joy to watch whenever he's on an episode of Doctor Who. Harry is a vaguely new addition for me. I've seen Genesis of the Daleks before, so I was aware that not only he was in the show and, you know, knew exactly what he was like, but I did know he would join the TARDIS at the end. However, it was still fun to see the process of him being a little bit skeptical of the whole Doctor, Time Lord, TARDIS, Time Traveller thing. I really liked that, and the fact that he was skeptical, and even actually stays skeptical towards the end of the episode, even when he steps inside the TARDIS for the first time, is great. It was a shame that we didn't get to see Harry actually walk in and see the interior of the TARDIS at the end of the story, but I suppose that's more of a New Who trope than anything, and obviously budget at the time probably wouldn't allow for that, but I still really enjoyed that specifically. I liked Harry Sullivan and his sort of early quirky little moments here and there. You can tell he's a little bit less obedient towards the Doctor, he's a little bit more critical, and I quite like that. It's a different kind of angle. It certainly makes things a little bit more enjoyable in terms of the team dynamic. Now the monsters, the robot and the secret society type stuff. Not really many complaints, but they were just incredibly surface level. Like, they weren't bad. They weren't like, I was watching them and being like, oh god, make this end. I wasn't. I was just sitting back and going, it's just not getting anything off me. I'm not like radiating like, oh, like Genesis of the Daleks has like the Daleks and Davros, and it's like, oh my god, it's great. And, you know, even other ones, compare for the later this season, I don't really want to spoil my views on certain stories, but even like, you know, Revenge of the Cybermen, like the Cybermen were still a presence and still enjoyable and like a big part of the story. Although the robot is a big part of the story still, I didn't really feel like I connect with him as a Classic Who villain. I've watched a lot of Classic Who stories, and most of the villains that I've seen so far, I'm looking at and going, yeah, no, I wouldn't actually be too against the idea of this villain showing up again in New Who. Even if it looked crap at the time, it's still, you know, it's still a bit of fun. Whereas the robot here and the whole secret society thing, I would rather we just forget about. and never ever go back to, because it was fine, but it was very surface level and just not interesting at all. I enjoyed the King Kong connotations with the robot. Obviously, you know, I'm a film fan, so it was nice to see that link. It was a bit weird, but I still enjoyed that element of it. Whether it was intentional or not, I presume it was intentional, but yeah, no, that was basically all that I really found too much interesting with the robot, because it was the only thing that made me go, oh, okay, that's interesting. But beyond that, nothing really too special or incredible, really. In terms of best bits for the story, there weren't many. I was quite impressed with the special effects towards the giant robot towards the end, and even stuff like the firing of the weapons and all that sort of thing, and all the abilities of the robot, I still thought were quite interesting. The stumbleness of the robot, like bouncing about like very clearly a person in a suit, I still enjoyed what it tried to do. I still enjoyed the special effects, that, you know, they were still genuinely quite convincing from time to time. Obviously not perfect, obviously you know their special effects. You know, it worked, and I was actually quite impressed by that, and I found myself coming out of the story going, yeah, not too bad. The Brigadier and Unit, it's always great to see the Brig, but obviously Unit as well as a sort of team, the Unit headquarters. It's always, I don't know, I haven't seen many of that era, you know, especially Pertwee, and I'm looking at it and being a little bit nostalgic over it. It's like, oh yeah, no, it's great to be in that sort of atmosphere, and I would absolutely love it if New Who one day went back to that and used the same set. Obviously the set doesn't exist anymore, but to build a similar set and just be like, oh, back here again, oh, that would be so cool. I don't care about Tower of London, I don't care about the Black Archive, oh, none of that rubbish. I just love the idea of this little Unit headquarters, like a very cheaply made set, but it's just gorgeous and I absolutely love it. And obviously the Fourth Doctor, best bits. Every scene with the Fourth Doctor was brilliant, like he was just incredible, as per, but yeah, that's all I can say. I've already talked quite a lot about Tom Baker. Overall, I'm going to give this story a 5 out of 10. It's good in some aspects, and it's great to see Tom Baker as the Fourth Doctor as a post-regeneration story. However, I can't help but feel that if this wasn't a post-regeneration story, if this was like the next season, if this was season 13 and it was Tom Baker's like first episode of his second season, or maybe just a continuation of John Pertwee's era and this was like a John Pertwee episode, I feel like it would go so far down in my estimations, because the rest of the story is just very surface level. Like, it's fine, it's not terrible, but I've seen a lot better in Classic Who and a lot more stuff that entertains me a hell of a lot more. It's not about it not being an iconic villain, it's just the fact that most of the story felt very two-dimensional in comparison to some of the other classic stories that I've seen. So now I've seen enough of Classic Who, I'm sort of looking at different stories and going, actually, yeah, that isn't as good. And it's sort of weird because I don't really know what the fan perspective is, because I don't want to know. I don't want to go out before I record my review and work out, you know, I have little inklings. Like, I know people love Genesis of the Daleks. I know people kind of like The Ark in Space, but I don't have a clue what people know about Robot. I don't know what people think at all. I just sort of, I experienced it and I didn't love it. It's fine, but I think a lot of what holds it up is the regeneration stuff, and the Fourth Doctor in general. Beyond that, you cut Tom Baker out of the episode and you've got a very surface level TV story. It's just fine, but it's not great, really. I don't know what else I can really say about this. It's fine, it's enjoyable, but yeah, overall 5 out of 10. It's just honestly just 50-50. That's pretty much all I actually want to say about Robot. It's a bit of a short review, I'm totally aware of that. However, I think I've summed it up as well as I possibly can. It's definitely an enjoyable story, it's definitely decent, it's not terrible by any means, but at the same time, it does leave a lot to be desired, and that's totally fine. Next week we're going to be talking about The Ark in Space, a bit more of a positive review hopefully, something that I hope you're all looking forward to, because I know it's a little bit of a fan favourite, so it's nice to sort of bounce between that. But yeah, if you haven't watched a lot of season 12 of Classic Who yet and you want to catch up with these reviews, then do it. Get through Classic Who, get through a little bit of season 12 whilst we're reviewing it. We'll kind of watch along, not watch along because I'm not doing a reaction or sort of like a live sort of watch, but like week by week, you know what story's coming, why don't you get it watched? Join on with a review, see what you think, experience some Classic Who in this horrible lockdown period. So yeah, next week is Ark in Space, week after that, Sontaran, you know, etc. We've done this before. So yes, I will see you all then. If you enjoyed this video, please leave a like, comment below for any more suggestions in the future, subscribe to the channel with notifications on if you haven't already. I've got a Patreon page if you want to support the channel and get some early access content, including this week's videos, obviously. Drunk Lords is coming up in a few days. Drunk Lords is a series that me and my mate do where we sit and we drink and we watch Doctor Who. This week we're watching Orphan 55 when we were absolutely wasted. That was fun, and Jack is actually editing this video, so big thanks to Jack as well. Anyway, yes, that's available on Patreon now for $1 a month, so if you do want to support the channel, get a few bonuses out of it, there's plenty of different things on there, so please do check that out if you are interested. Totally optional though. And beyond that, Twitter, Instagram, linked in the description below if you want to check that out and support me on there. And that's pretty much it. Have a lovely day, and I will see you all next time. Bye bye!